All right, thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast. We're still discussing xenophobia in South Africa. Is a serious source of concern to many African countries who have nationals in South Africa, and especially here in Nigeria. And we know that out of every 4 black people on earth, 1 is a Nigerian. So if you make that calculation, you know that there's so many Nigerians in South Africa doing business and doing so many things. But joining us now is a public affairs analyst, Razak Lokoba. Razak, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year in February. Thank you.
It's almost March.
Exactly, it's almost March now.
That's what you say when you are seeing for the first time.
Anyway, Africans say on the day you wake up, when you wake up, that's your morning.
Yes.
So it's fine. On Skype is a lecturer at Northwest University in South Africa, Jendele Humbo. Jendele, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to have you join us right now.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, let me start with Jendele, who is in South Africa, before I come to you, Razak. Jendele, you are on ground there. You have, in all of these reports that has been flying across the world about xenophobia, you have seen them firsthand. Can you give us a basic picture of how these things are taking place, or what is really leading to all of this, how it plays out on a daily basis on the streets of South Africa?
Well, thank you very much. I think this time around, the way it's played out is quite not very much different from what we have seen in the past. The xenophobic attacks around here have always been targeted at black immigrants. It's always come with some volume of violence. In 2008, a lot of lives were lost. But then it also happened again in 2011, mildly in 2010, and then it cropped up again in 2015, and this time around it's coming with a similar pattern. The only thing is that this time around it seems that the body count probably has not started, and if it has started, it's not yet been widely reported. But again, I think if you recollect what happened in 2008, this was how it went on and on and on for days without anyone taking any serious action until the image of the burning man shocked the entire world to begin to talk about the seriousness of what was happening, and also for government to begin to think about or to come out to say something. And that was under President Mbeki then. Now, but if you look at what's going on now in a similar pattern, the question you begin to ask would be, is the government going to wait until the kind of thing that happened in 2008 happens before it takes a decisive action against what government itself has tagged as criminality?
All right.
Because, I mean, when you talk about...
Okay, Jendele, let's bring Razak in here now. Jendele said the government of South Africa isn't really doing much about it. That's for South Africa. Have you wondered why the Nigerian government isn't really doing much about it as well?
Well, it might not. These things happen all over the world. It might not become because xenophobic. It might not be what? It might not become xenophobia. What happened? If you look at history, the reason why Hitler said the Jews must be killed was because the Jews were taking over the German economy that time in Malaysia. Just in the recent time, Trump was also saying that immigrants are taken. Then the Brexit was also similar to this. But it all has consequence. The rest of the world also ensured that they resisted Hitler. And people are resisting Trump in America today too. So the way to stop it is when there are resistance. But it has become a pattern, and they had a free day because our government, particularly our diplomats, I've read the report of a diplomat. The lame excuse they gave was that Nigerians were indulging in criminal activity. That was why they were singling them out. That's unacceptable to us. So this time around, with Buhari in place, knowing the profile of Buhari very well, remember very well when Umari Duko was to be brought back, they seized our plane. Buhari did similar to for British Airlines to here. and lead to a lot of issues. So I know that the government in place today are not like the government in the past.
Are you aware that?
There must be consequence in terms of policy.
Hold on. Are you aware that between in the space of 2 years, about 116 Nigerians have been killed in South Africa over xenophobic attacks? Are you aware?
It's not far away from what you are saying, that there must be consequence in policy formulation, not that there must be repressive attack. For us in Nigeria too, we know all South African interests in Nigeria too, but we felt that you should not treat injustice with injustice. What South Africans are doing is condemnable. Forget the role we have played in their fight for freedom. We play major role there. But forget that countries have a right to move any part of the world legitimately. Chinese plus India, they are equal to the rest of the world in terms of population. So they are everywhere in the world. Once you move at all legitimately, you don't have a right to do what South Africans are doing to Nigeria. So the government of Nigeria is found wanting in this aspect, because Ghana was going Nigeria too, but we didn't kill anybody. And Ghana had to sit Nigeria down to say that, why are you doing this to us? It was sorted out. And
so
since that time,
wanting in this case?
The government is wanting in this case because there is no decisive action taken towards that. And the way to begin is to is to come out openly that we are going to sever our relationship with South Africa if our citizens are not protected the way we are protecting your citizens here. And on the basis of that, we have to sort it out. If we know that South Africans is a no-go for Nigeria, let's know. If we must continue to must relate as equals. I know a lot of South Africans in Nigeria. I have employed a white South African, Jack. I know how much I paid him in Europe when he was working with me. And he was never molested. I've employed South African blacks in Nigeria too, in my company as a construction, and nobody has ever harassed him. So if we don't get similar treatment here in South Africa, there's no reason why we should continue to relate with South Africa as our African brother. There's no basis at all. And that's the direction the government must be looking at. If you don't look at that direction, it's going to continue. There must be consequence for what South Africans are doing. I don't want to know the reason why they are doing what they are doing.
But on the other
Nigerians
hand,
are not the only criminals in South Africa.
But if the government of Nigeria...
there are South Africans also that are also criminals.
Well, criminality is about humanity.
So it's not an excuse.
Yeah, but if government of Nigeria and even government of other countries decide to toe that line of taking decisive steps against South Africa, would it be fair? Because those who are involved in xenophobic attacks, it's not about the government of South Africa. It's about the government of Nigeria. It is the people.
It's about the government. That's not acceptable to many Nigerians. Because the character, if you look at the genesis of Boko Haram in the north, the leaders in the north, the government in the north, indulged this violence way back when they kill people of other states, other ethnic groups. They pretend as they didn't see it. And they were so indulged to a point where it became Boko Haram. Boko Haram does not know the currency. They kill everybody. That's what South Africans are doing now. They indulge. It's indulging. I know South African government. I know what they do to their own nationals when they do similar things. You remember the labor and the police clash? You remember what they did to them? They were crushed. So if South Africans, they are thorough, they are committed to the question of security, and they know what they are supposed to do on issues like this. They know what they're supposed to do. They are indulging them. And that kind of body language, I think, was part of the reason why South African president was invited to Nigeria about maybe last year or so, or 2005 years, last year. So the assurance he gave was that it will not repeat itself, and it has repeated itself. So
it's
we
all right
call
now
on the government of President Buhari that he has a pattern, he's a renowned person for resisting this kind of a thing, and he should come out all out for South African government. There should be no pretense about it. It should be resisted. If it means severing our relationship with South Africa, I will mobilize to support the government in that direction.
All right. We pray it doesn't get there yet. But however, let's go on a break. We still have Jendele Humbo with us on Skype from South Africa. We have Razak Olukoba with us right here discussing xenophobia in South Africa. We're going out on TVC Entertainment. Our viewers there can continue with TVC Breakfast with TVC Nigeria on Concert Channel 190 and DSTV Channel 418.
GoTV is 45 and SCTV 510. Razak is here and Jendele is here. Let's know the difference between criminality and xenophobic attacks. Stay with us.
Right, if you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast. We're discussing xenophobia in South Africa against other nationals in South Africa, especially African nationals in South Africa. I was talking to a South African friend sometime, and when I was mentioning xenophobia, he said, no, what's going on is not xenophobia, it's Afrophobia.
Okay.
You know, so he's
Narrowing
narrowing
it
it down because the point there is
sense, really.
Anyone from Brazil, if he walks on the street or does the same thing any African is doing, no problem. But if you are from Ghana or you're from Nigeria or from Kenya or from Zimbabwe or Zambia, that is where the issue is. Okay, we'll talk about that. Let's bring you more perspective to the story. Now, xenophobia basically is the irrational fear or hatred of people perceived to be foreign. It is also seen as dislike of prejudice against people from other countries.
Xenophobic attacks in South Africa is not news, as over the years such attacks have swept across the country, beginning in Johannesburg and quickly spread into Durban and its surrounding township. The South African Human Rights Commission, in the wake of recent animosity and violence enacted upon foreign nationals from other parts of the African continent, termed it Afrophobia, like Mike said earlier, in a fresh wave of xenophobic attacks in South Africa targeted particularly at Nigerians. This time, the federal government has come down hard on the South African government. We're here to say that really warning that further attacks without any reprimand may incur dire consequences. What could be the dire consequences?
When we talk about consequences, we want to create that mind picture. What would that consequence? What would it look like? What would it be like? And all of that. We're still waiting to see. But many say that recent violence in the country represents long simmering anti-migrant sentiments that have been increasing in the country since the early 1990s. That's after the apartheid, when the country opened its borders to other nationals who they now accuse of stealing their jobs.
Let's give a brief history of how xenophobic attacks against fellow Africans started in South Africa. Prior to 1994, immigrants faced discrimination and even violence in South Africa. After democratization in 1994, contrary to expectations, the incidence of xenophobia increased. In December 1994 and January 1995, armed youth gangs in Alexandria Township outside of Johannesburg destroyed homes and property of undocumented migrants and marched the individuals to the local police station demanding that the foreigners be repatriated.
Talking about Alexandria, I remember covering the presidential election in Alexandria in parts of Johannesburg, and it's a neighborhood of a lot of people just living, a communal setting, and it's really wonderful. Now, in September 1998, two Senegalese and a Mozambican were thrown from a moving train in Johannesburg by a group of individuals returning from a rally organized by a group blaming foreigners for the level of unemployment, crime, and even the spread of AIDS. Now, in 2000, xenophobic killings were reported in Cape Town. A Kenyan and two Nigerian business owners were shot dead. Two Angolan brothers were trapped inside their house and burned to death.
That's maliciously done. In 2008, an outburst of xenophobic violence in Alexandria again and Township, Johannesburg, triggered more attacks in other cities like Durban and Cape Town. Many houses were burned, 342 shops were looted, and 313 burnt down. More than 60 people were killed and hundreds displaced in the worst xenophobic attacks in the country's post-apartheid history.
Now, xenophobic attacks continue to grow, and in April 2015, foreign nationals were targeted again in Durban. Two Ethiopians were petrol bombed in Umlazi, which ignited violence that quickly spread to other cities. 8 people were killed, including a Mozambican national, Emmanuel Sithole, with thousands displaced in that attack. Okay, we're giving you the background so you get to know that this didn't just start today. It's been on for quite some time after apartheid. Now, we still have Jendele Humbo with us on Skype from South Africa. Jendele, let's take it from the allegations that foreign nationals use the term stealing our jobs. You are in South Africa. Is there any kind of discrimination where people are
Has it stolen a South African job? Maybe we should ask you that. Do you think you've stolen a job from a South African, Dele?
Well, I think I'll address that shortly, but I think there's also one angle to this issue that we also need to quickly clarify, and that's the issue of the media and the influence of social media on the fueling of xenophobic violence and other kinds of prejudice against people across different national boundaries. Before you went on the break, I was hearing something like 116 or so Nigerians haven't been killed in the past 2 years as a result of xenophobic violence. And this is absolutely not correct. Of course, some Nigerians have been killed in South Africa, but not all the figure, and not as high as 116. Not that figure is as a result of xenophobic violence. Different kinds of crimes happen. A person might get stabbed in a shebeen, for example, in what we call shebeen here, or a beer parlor, but might be stabbed as a result of some other issues, which might not be as a result of xenophobic violence. So but when these kinds of figures are bandied on social media, they create a lot of tension. Now, to go directly to your question, have I stolen a South African job? The clear answer is no. If you look at the policies in South Africa, they are very specific on the procedures that must be followed before a foreigner is employed. Well, that's quote and unquote if you say we are foreigners in Africa. I don't think any African in Africa should be considered a foreigner, because that's perhaps one of the greatest dangers of what we're talking about. If a white man comes to South Africa and takes a job, he probably is not deemed a foreigner. But if another black person comes and takes a job, we begin to look at questions of segregation and divisions based on artificial national boundaries that were created by the Europeans. And that's what actually they wanted to achieve, and they are beginning to achieve it because of our own slack. Now, how does it work? Before a job goes to a foreigner, it is advertised, and then interviews are done, and then the job goes to a foreigner only where there is no qualified South African to take the job. So it's about questions of people looking for specific skills. One good example is that if you look at the World University Ranking, the top 10, among the top 10 African universities, you will find a minimum of 5 or 6 South African universities. This is because these universities have been able to attract skills from all over the world. And this is part of things that the government needs to begin to educate its populace about. Now, when you say you're doing a rally, for example, against illegal immigrants, how is the average man on the street going to be able to distinguish between an illegal immigrant and a legal immigrant? So when you continue to encourage this kind of vigilantism, in which case individuals are allowed to take the laws into their own hands, you are creating a lawless state or a lawless country in which you cannot account for the actions of people. And the prejudice that this also creates is that crime is black. Because you were talking about questions of Afrophobia, which is the term that some scholars have begun to give to what is happening at the moment. It's a form of black on black violence, and it's also a way of reinforcing the idea that every criminal is essentially black. And so, government needs to sit down. But the question, the other angle that we need to look at is to ask ourselves, why hasn't the South African government acted decisively against those they call criminal elements who are perpetrating this thing? It's simply because in politics, politicians, when they fail, they look for scapegoats. The non-nationals of the country become easy scapegoats for the failure of the government in power. If they had promised them jobs and they cannot provide those jobs, they had promised them a better life and they cannot give them that better life, it is perhaps convenient for the government to lay the blames at the door of some people who have come from God knows where to take these jobs that are actually non-existent in any way. And so I mean, it's a very difficult narrative that continues to go on, and every year in, year out, we begin to see these kinds of violence erupt. When Thabo Mbeki said yesterday at his investiture as the Chancellor of UNISA that it's a question of pure looting that people just use this so-called xenophobia as an excuse to loot other people's shops. And I began to think about the dynamics of that, because big business in South Africa never gets attacked. It's only the poor on the poor. People who are trying to do informal businesses, who are trying to earn a living, whether they come from Ethiopia, Somalia, Mozambique, it doesn't matter. What's important for some of these people who perpetuate this act at times is to have access to their property, have access to their shops, and be able to take a few things out of there. And so if things continue the way they are going, and you begin to see instances of threats of reprisal attacks from immigrant populations, then we are beginning to see a recipe for chaos, which might not be helpful to either South Africa or any of the immigrants living in the country at the moment.
All right, Jendele, thank you. We'll come back to you shortly. But let's go on a break before we bring in Razak in to weigh in on some of the issues Jendele has raised. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast. We're still discussing xenophobia in South Africa.
Glad to have you back. It is TVC Breakfast, and we're looking at xenophobia in South Africa as it concerns African nationals, particularly Nigerians. And we'd like to state here that Jendele, earlier, the figure you talked about was quoted from a statement released by this essay to the president on diaspora, Abike Dabiri Erewa, as corroborated by the chairman of the Nigerians Association living in South Africa, Chris Anene. So 116 is the figure that the press statement stated, and that's what we are quoting. All right, so we still have with us Jendele Ugbo in South Africa via Skype, and we have Razak Ulukwaba, who is a public affairs analyst. Jendele Ugbo talked about failure of the system, South African system, to provide job for its citizens, and of course looking for someone to blame. Is that the case? And let's tie it out to Nigerians who are being treated badly in South Africa but refuse to come back home. Are they afraid that even when they get back here, there's, the grass is not really greener?
Well, something close to what Jendele has said is that the people of South Africans require some level of orientation. They have not completely recovered from the complex thing, the issue of inferiority complex, because of the long reign of apartheid. And if you see a country that has undergone such an horrific past, what the government has to do is to continuously begin to talk to its people about accommodating people who are outside that. It is not everybody that come from other countries to your country that are your enemies. Your nationals are in other places of the world. Just like South African people and other rest of the world can't produce entirely what they need. You need assistance, intellectual assistance, material assistance to survive as a nation. That is important. Outside that, I don't want to agree with Jendele that we are creating an escape route for them. The internal issue of a country, as far as nationals of other country is concerned, is not their business. Their security is uppermost. And that's why some countries in the world advise their citizens that go to where you are celebrated, not to where you are tolerated. In any case, where our countries in the world, where Nigerians are celebrated, I have not seen one. In Benin Republic, we are repeatedly insulted. In South Africa, that's our in African countries, so in Malaysia, and that has to do with the image of Nigeria, which I think is beginning to change. So that's the answer to that. Then why are our people not wanting to come home? Because there are two issues to this thing: the attitude of South African people, then the Nigerian people too. Though it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable because there are Nigerians who are doing legitimate business in South Africa. But a friend told me that someone said he knows you, that he wants you to come and see him, and he told me that 90% of, according to him, he said 90% of some of us in South Africa are not doing clean business. So now if I want to travel to South Africa, I should be careful where I sleep, where I move to, where I go. So I have that at the back of my mind, if you get it. Such that when issues of such nature happen, it is very difficult for you to distinguish between going out for criminals a xenophobic attack. And I'll tell you quickly that even at rallies, there's what is called mobocracy, government of the mob, for the mob and by the mob. When we go in our own rally, some mobs come and they hijack the process. There's a xenophobic attack. Then the criminals join them
and take advantage
of it. So there are two issues involved in this. The reason why Nigerians don't want to come home is one, because there's no assurance. There are reasons where other countries of the world travel out for greener pasture. But the determination I don't want to come back is because they don't have anything to come and fall back.
But the irony of all of this is Nigeria is a hub where Ghanaians are here working, Benin Republic, Kenyans are here, Egyptians are here. Nigeria is just a hub of the whole of Africa converging to work, do any kind of work you like.
That's what I kept saying, and that's what you have also said, that the food basket of Africa should be Nigeria.
It is, even Nigeria, it's still Nigeria.
It's Nigeria. No.
Should be Nigeria.
Should be Nigeria.
Should be.
But because of 170 million population, that's 2.3% of even the world population itself. That's huge. And that's the reason why when the Jonathan and Buhari election wanted to come up, it is the interest of the entire world to make sure that there's no violence in Nigeria, because the world will not have the capacity to contain it. 170 million to be in chaos. So, but all those things are beginning to work out now. Agric is coming back. Telecom is coming back. It's coming up, not coming back, it's coming up. A lot of things that are supposed to attract people legitimately to a nation is beginning to germinate in Nigeria. And that's why I want to encourage our brothers outside Nigeria. And that's why I want to encourage our brothers outside Nigeria, that there are better things you can do in Nigeria than where you are barely tolerated. If you are a driver, if you are a mechanic, opportunities are beginning to come up in Nigeria.
Sorry, I don't want to burst your bubbles, but you're aware that 1.7 million Nigerians lost their jobs last year.
In South Africa?
No, in Nigeria, yeah.
In Nigeria, as a result of what people call economic depression, my sister, the currency of the world that people trade with is dollar. You don't hand dollar on the street. You don't mint it. Where you get dollar from is the business you do. Nigerians don't have any business as a government they do except oil. And our naira, as a businessman, if you are not in Nigeria, what will you need my Nigerian naira? You don't need this for anything. And that's the reason why dollar kept flooring naira over and over and over again. And to come out of it, the only reason is forced to stop consuming. 90% of what we consume is imported. You rely on this dollar. There's no dollar anywhere to get. That's number one. Number two is that we must begin to look in from oil. There should be agri that I've mentioned. There should be origin. There's shipping lines.
Solid minerals.
There should be all these things. And to come up, if any Buhari cabinet tells me that in 1 year we are going to get back on our feet, I will know it's deceiving me. And if any opposition also tells me that in 2 years I should begin to stone Buhari, I will know he's making calculations of 2019. I will not answer him. I have my head on my neck. Okay. And I can also make my superior intelligence to that of a politician who wants to rubbish Buhari's name because of 2019. I will not accept that.
It's all right. Razak, thank you for that. But let's bring in Jendele here. Now, Jendele, you said earlier on the government is actually not doing enough to nip this issue in the bud. Razak has also made assertion to that as well. Now, beyond all of this xenophobic attack has been on for some time, and government not taking decisive action. Do you see, or do you feel that there is something even beyond the xenophobia that people are not really seeing from the body language of the government of South Africa?
Yeah, well, thank you. I think if you look at the way things have played out, when people talk about body language and things like that, you take that from the kinds of statements that government officials make, including the president. The president was very reluctant to admit that what was happening was xenophobia or Afrophobia. And the way he went about it was, at least as far as I am concerned, leaves a lot of people disappointed. Because he talked about, well, when this thing happens in America, you don't call it xenophobia. When it happens in Europe, you don't call it xenophobia. Why call it xenophobia in South Africa? And the question or the angle he failed to look at is that why is it that every time this happens in South Africa, it's always nationals of particular countries that are targeted, especially from Africa and a bit of the part of Asia that is involved in that. Because when you come to South Africa and you look at the informal sector, you find a lot of non-South African nationals who come from the rest of Africa, and then a part of Asia, particularly talking about the Pakistanis in that sector. And so, why are they always the subject of attack? And when, for example, you were also, someone was talking about the question of Donald Trump asking, shutting the doors of the US against people, there were procedures, and those procedures were official. And when the courts overturned that, the people did not take up arms and say, no, in spite of what the court said, people should come and leave the US. So the point is this: the government's inability to deal with crime as crime is one problem. And one good example of that is that since these things became very visible and more vicious in 2008, up to today, we've not seen a single South African convicted for perpetrating violence against an immigrant. And so usually what you hear, the rhetoric is that, oh yeah, some people are being held, we've arrested a particular number of people and they will appear in court soon. Whether they appear in court and get prosecuted or not, or whether they get to court and get a bail and go free of charge, is another thing that we need to begin to look at. Now, the other aspect of it that we also need to think of is what we call official xenophobia. Official xenophobia in the sense that when government itself continues to reel out statistics that does not exist, then you begin to wonder. There was a document flying around here in South Africa some time ago that there are about 13 million immigrants living in South Africa. And then there's a body called Africa Check. We did a check on that and came out with a figure of less than 3 million. And so when these things happen, you create a kind of anxiety and panic in society, which is likely to fuel people's fears and then get them to act in particular manners that might not augur well for the system. And again here, you also see that one other thing is that the violence here is always directed at the vulnerable people. Those who are vulnerable, who can easily be intimidated, and who can easily be dispossessed of things they have. And so, if you allow this kind of things to carry on, then it shows that there are so many undertones of these xenophobic practices that makes it very difficult for people to be able to live at ease. And then when you talk about Africa and tit for tat, I find that a little bit uncomfortable, because a tit for tat is not going to help Africa in any way. If like the reprisal attacks that happened at the MTN offices in Abuja, if we begin to see those kinds of things, it means that as Africans, we have refused to get our acts together and sit down to look at how things work properly for us in our different countries. Now, if it has to come to the two governments or the different governments of the countries involved, and I think that is where the call by Nigeria on the African Union becomes very significant. Because at the level of the African Union, we should be able to resolve issues like this. If we are not able to do that, then we can as well disband the African Union and let everyone go his or her own way. Now, if you take the example of Europe, what is the whole essence of the European Union? Is to ensure for free movement of humans and capital and doing business with ease and so on.
Yes. But
today in Africa, in almost every African country that you need to go, with the exclusion of a few like Rwanda and Kenya, where you can get your visa on arrival, there are still very stringent entry conditions imposed on Africans when they have to travel within their own continent.
All right,
Dele,
let me just chip in what you're talking about, the AU thing. You're also aware that there's a charter, there's an African Union charter on the issue of xenophobia in 2015. That happened in Banjul in the Gambia. And of course, you know that South Africa is a staunch member of the AU. So if South Africa wouldn't respect that charter on that resolution rather on xenophobia, then it should perhaps be expelled from the AU.
Well, you all know that it's going to be difficult to expel South Africa from the AU. There are the three strongest powers in the AU will be South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, until Egypt began to have its own problems recently. Now, but if you want to expel South Africa for not obeying a resolution, don't forget that the resolution is merely advisory, and they can take to the advice, they can refuse to follow what the advice says. We have seen countries violate even more serious articles in the past. And so, but what we need to do is that from the level of the African Union, everyone who has to participate, they need, I think we assume that our leaders know what they're doing. And in some cases, you come to find out that leaders don't even know what they're doing. So they need a particular kind of reorientation in the African Union. You need to cascade this down from the level of the Committee of Heads of State to the Commission itself, down to different civil society organizations, which can then go to different countries to educate the citizens about the Africanness that can bring everyone together. And to also let them know that the new world order survives on a kind of multiculturalism that encourages migration of individuals, capital, and labor.
All right, Jendele, let me put you on hold a little. We'll go on a break and then we come back. But don't forget, too, that top of the hour will be time for us to go for the news update with Azizat. Stay with us. All right, we have just less than 2 minutes before we go for the news update. Azizat is already standing by, but let me quickly ask Razak in here with us. Now, when we talk about, earlier we're talking about, we're rolling out comments from members of Nigerian government, members of House of Reps have come to say there's going to be consequences. In fact, the word consequences was used, dire consequences, if South Africa doesn't take necessary action. Now, when it comes to Nigeria, yesterday I was reading and someone said, if Nigeria takes a drastic decision on this, Nigeria will be more hurt from this than even South Africa.
Well, it is better for Nigerians to be more hurt if Nigerian government take drastic action than leaving it and not doing anything. It's going to repeat itself. And we must try to point to a level where it is clear that if something is not done, we will severe relationship with South Africa. And that's the peaks of the matter. And that's what any sensible government that takes priority for the life of its citizens, that's what they're going to do. If you look at histories, what led to relationship, crack in relationship with other countries of the world is issues like
all right,
this.
Let me interrupt you a little. All right, we are discussing xenophobia in South Africa. We've been talking with Razak Olokoba with us here in the studio. And we have on Skype Jendele Humbo, a lecturer with Northwest University in South Africa. Now, before I bring in Foladele to give us a reaction on social media, you were making a point as to what government should do and what should be the outcome of this when it comes to decisive steps. We remember a few years ago when Nigeria fined telecoms, South African telecoms in Nigeria. We remember the reaction. The president of South Africa was here, the minister was here, government agencies from South Africa were here in Nigeria to discuss what, how amicable it can be settled.
They have more interest than even MCN. 60% of wines we drink in Nigeria today, even if I don't drink, is from South Africa. There are quite a number of businesses that South Africans are doing here. Well, that's an indirect policy reaction. There should be direct policy. They should not run away from confronting South African government. That's pretense. If you have to go after MTN, that's the legitimate business. Nigerians who had their protest last week, that's the reaction from Nigerians. But I'm talking about reactions from government. Nigerians are languishing in jails all over the world, in Saudi Arabia, in Malaysia, in Russia, in China, Indonesia, all over the world. And it is now that we are beginning to have census of Nigerians in prisons all over the world. Government officials are not taking note of that. No countries in the world, except a few countries like Nigeria, don't know where all their citizens are scattered all over them. They have their record. We don't have such record. And this kind of attitude must stop. That's what we are saying. And the way to begin the approach towards South Africa is to call on South African government that you are indulging your people on this matter. There are no consequences at all. You have not tried anybody. And if you don't, and there should be time limit between so and so time. If it does not occur to us in terms of what you are going to do, we are going to take steps, and that step should start from saying that we don't want to relate with South Africa, because the base of relationship is not for Zuma and Buhari to be shaking hands. It's for South Africans to come to Nigeria and work freely as South Africans, and vice versa. So if it gets to a point where Nigerians are not safe in South Africa, so what's the basis of relationship? The basis of relationship is my citizens are respected in your country,
and yours are respected in mine.
If there's no such, there is no basis for relationship.
All right, let's bring in Foladele here to give us a perspective or reaction on social media.
Good morning,
Fola,
Mike.
good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Salami. Good morning, Razak. Good morning, Jandele. Okay, so let's see some reactions online to this very heartbreaking discussion. And we have reactions from South Africa and Nigeria. So Tabiso says, we're all equal citizens. Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Somalia, etc. We're all Africans, so let's unite against xenophobia. Hashtag peace in SA. Jesse Phrase says, hashtag xenophobia, what would Mandela do? WWMD.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Melissa Kububa says, while our government cannot control citizens of foreign nations, it can and must protect its citizens, especially those in foreign land. Hashtag xenophobia. Flopo Ya Mampela says, ethnic, religious, Boko Haram, South African, xenophobia. Hey, Nigerians are going through the most. Recession. Born Freeish says, I do believe that hashtag xenophobia is just one of the many grim symptoms of the lack of good education, even if you went to a good school. Damiloji says, on xenophobia, if it were developed nations, stock of companies residual in oppressed nations would have suffered a great hit on stock market. Tuli TP says, this xenophobia is very disturbing. We must pray that God help us because this issue is bigger than us. A very resistant demon. Hashtag sad.
God in here.
God in here.
God cannot come down from heaven. God is not the one attacking people.
It's a demon, Mike. It's a demon, she says.
But the government has to just take steps to do these things.
God walk through human beings.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And demons walk through human beings too. So
exactly, look at that. Okay, last one here from Drop Top Boy says, reality is that South Africa is becoming more dangerous. We have to repair our Nigeria. It's not their fault. Hashtag xenophobia. Okay, so we have to fix our Nigeria. It's not their fault. Let me go to Jandele actually on this one. So Jandele, say we actually nip this in the bud this time. Mike said earlier, this isn't the first time this is happening. How do we know that if we fix this time, it won't rear its head again?
Sides on both countries, not just South Africa, Nigeria also, for the leadership to get their acts together. In South Africa, all the fault lines, the political fault lines that are making their people to be angry and to take care of their needs as much as they can. But again, Nigeria on its own part has to do with the question of what people in international studies call soft power. If Nigeria's soft power were to be as strong as it was before South Africa came out of the apartheid regime that had headed down for so long, this kind of things would not have happened, because it's at the international level, how strong you are as a player begins to impact on the kind of treatment that your people get wherever they go. And so we need to make these 2 points clear. And then for both countries, we need to begin to think, especially for South Africa, how to deal with questions of national chauvinism, where people think that their country is better than the other, or their people are better than other people. An African is an African anywhere in the world. That's my belief. In any case, a human being should be seen as a human being anywhere in the world. And so if government wants to be decisive in South Africa this time around, I think what they need to do is to make example of a few perpetrators of this violence. That's when we begin to see a semblance of seriousness on the part of the South African government to deal with the issue. And so let's hand law enforcement back to the to those who are legally recognized to enforce laws. It's not going to be proper for individual citizens or vigilante groups to begin to look for criminals all over the place to say, okay, I suspect you of crime, and so I'm going to sniff you out of this place at all costs. Now, let the police play the role of the police. Let the courts play the role of the courts. If you find an immigrant committing crime in your country, let the police arrest them, take them through the legal process. Okay. If they have to be sentenced to jail, send them to jail. That's not a problem.
All right, thank you. Mike, do I have time for one more question?
No more questions.
I really wanted to take him up on national chauvinism, but it's all right.
No time again.
Okay, fine. Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Okay, but when are we going to break?
We're going on break now, but we have to, it's sad, time is against us. We have to round off these discussions right now. Razak Olokoba, thank you very much for coming on the program.
It's a pleasure, Benedict.
Thank you. And Jendele Humbo, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. We wish you well and stay safe in South Africa where you are.